Hi, pharmaphorum listeners. Jonah Comstock, editor-in-chief here. The following podcast, brought to you by Reverba Global, is also available as a video podcast on pharmaphorum.com. Check the link in the show notes for the video version of the podcast, or you can listen to the whole conversation here in your podcast app of choice. Enjoy! Hello and welcome to the pharmaphorum podcast. Today we're joined by Cheryl Lubbert, co-founder and CEO of Reverba Global and a longtime leader in the healthcare and biopharma space. She spent her career driving patient-centered transformation at some of the world's leading pharma companies and now leads one of the most trusted names in global healthcare engagement. Cheryl, welcome. It's good to have you with us.
Thanks so much, Jonah. And as always, it's a pleasure. We've had some really great discussions over the years, and I'm really looking forward to where this one goes today.
And also joining us today is Carolyn Whiting, SVP of Clinical and Medical Client Services at Reverba. She spent her career translating complex science into clear, actionable communication, whether for healthcare professionals, patients, or cross-functional teams. Carolyn, it's also great to have you with us.
Thank you, Jonah.
So, Cheryl, you've been a leader in the healthcare industry for a long time, both on the pharma side, in companies like Abbott, Amgen, Bristol Myers Squibb, and, of course, in your role as co-founder and CEO of Reverba. You've helped shape how organizations think about patients, not just as participants, but as true partners in every stage of the product lifestyle. And now with the company's global expansion and enhanced capabilities, you're defining what scientific engagement means to both patients and healthcare providers. So to start out, let's talk a little bit about omnichannel engagement, right? It's everywhere as a buzzword, but what does it really mean? What strategies should pharma be adopting to make sure that all stakeholders remain informed and empowered across these different channels? And how does pharma ensure patients still have equitable access to accurate information about their health?
When we talk about omnichannel engagement, it's not just about being on every channel. It's actually about creating a unified experience that feels relevant and consistent, and I think most importantly, credible. Patients, providers, they don't experience touch points separately. So we can't treat them that way. It really starts with a shared narrative. It starts with the scientific engagement and scientific narrative. A true omnichannel strategy isn't about volume. It's about integration. It's about making sure that what patients and doctors see, hear, and also feel, it's the same.
Yeah. So as those, as these channels change, as kind of blur together, because it's not just the science that it's becoming more complex, right? It's our digital life and our communication. How is the company evolving?
Reverba spent more than 20 years helping elevate the patient voice. In fact, I think we've been doing this since before patient centricity was a buzzword. But the world's changing pretty fast. I think we would all agree. And I feel like we're evolving right along with it. We've added decades of experience in medical affairs, HCP engagement, and global medical education. What's exciting is how we're bringing patients into this scientific conversation, not as an afterthought, but as a core voice in that process. And I think that's what's going to create deeper engagement. It's going to build longer-term trust, and we use the scientific engagement to actually change how patients are thinking, how they're feeling, and ultimately how they take action. And that translates into outcomes, better health literacy, better self-efficacy. And that's what everybody, I think, is really working towards.
Yeah, I think scientific engagement, scientific literacy for all of us has never been more important, right? So what does that meaningful communication look like in today's environment?
Well, for patients, I think meaningful communication might mean understanding what a treatment can or can't do. It might mean seeing a peer share their experience in a way that makes science a little bit more relatable. And that's why I think our mentor platforms are so important. And in fact, we pioneered the very first one of those in 2007. And when a patient can connect with somebody who's been through the similar experience, it really humanizes the science or the data. It's no longer just clinical. It's actually becomes personal. And that's what builds confidence. That's what motivates action. For healthcare professionals, meaningful engagement's about clarity and support. They need tools. And yes, that means timely science based insights, but they also need tools that help guide patient conversations. That's where I think hub support can come in. Reimbursement help, obviously, patient access services, but also downloadable resources. When these are integrated into the scientific strategy from the start, that kind of takes the pressure off the provider and improves the experience for the patient. And, from a medical affairs standpoint, medical affairs is perfectly positioned here. They're the scientific experts, but I think more than that, they are translators, facilitators, and I think increasingly they're helping build relationships. They're kind of this bridge between clinical and commercial, and that bridge has never been more important.
And this is new for you. I mean, we've spoken before, and Med Affairs wasn't part of Reverba's remit. So why kind of move into that area, and what do you see as some of the sort of unique advantages of how Med Affairs is positioned?
Yeah, Carolyn, what are your thoughts on this? Can you add a little bit more?
Yeah, thanks, Cheryl. I mean, I could go on for forever about this too, and it's such an exciting topic and incredible to see what is changing. Um, I started my career as a medical writer, and now to see what we are capable of doing with medical affairs clients is truly incredible. But what we've seen change is medical affairs has gone from being a support function, sitting there doing limited to data checks, reviews, to now becoming one of the most strategic connectors across the healthcare ecosystem. So in many ways, as Cheryl said, it's bridging this link between scientific integrity and human relevance, that relationship piece, making sure that both healthcare professionals and patients, families and caregivers as well, get access to that accurate, timely, and meaningful information. And in this current environment, this is more important than ever, considering the number of questions that are out there, conflicting health information that's available at every turn or every click or every banner ad. And why this is really exciting is that medical affairs teams are now uniquely positioned to bring the authentic voice of the patient into scientific communications, and not just be at the end of that process as like a final stamp of approval or ticking the box, but really bringing it upstream to where we can help influence R&D and access strategies, for example. So what this really means, and Cheryl, you alluded this already, is it's really about engaging patients in medical content reviews, involving them in advisory boards, seeking out their opinion because it really truly does matter, and even helping create educational tools through co-creation that help improve health literacy. And so the way that we can look at medical affairs is they really serve as the translators for HCPs who have to make those decisions about disease management and treatment for what is often an incredibly diverse group of patients in their practice. And this unique position that MedAff holds is like a lens into the healthcare ecosystem for their pharma company. So they see the gaps in care. They provide insights to their clinical counterparts about where new research efforts could be assessed for feasibility or applicability. Because really what they're saying is here's a problem we have to solve for the people who are out there helping treat patients. So, taking that all into considerations, one of our goals at Reverba as part of our strategic consulting is to help guide medical affairs leaders to arrive at a point of helping shape their departments to ask the right questions. Is how do we help explain the complexity of the science without losing clarity? And how do we maintain that scientific rigor, that credibility that medical affairs is known for, but ensuring it's accessible and empathetic?
So those are great questions. How do you address them effectively?
Right. And we're grappling with that with our clients, but we're really also making great progress. So, if medical affairs is going to play this role of a scientific translator, the key is to treat consistency as well as that adaptability for audience, not just as two ends of the spectrum, but as a critical balance, let's say, to get it right. And that's what creates this real opportunity for medical affairs to not just be a scientific function, but that bridge, as Cheryl's described, that connects all of these voices and typically who are the owners of that scientific narrative. And Cheryl, you briefly described already, what that scientific narrative is and the value it can bring. But within that narrative, we have the unmet needs, the MOA, and that evidence. That's what doesn't change. But what we do help evolve is how we frame that information, depending on who we're talking to. So for an HCP, that might mean diving deeper into the statistical analysis or secondary endpoints that are particularly relevant to maybe the population they see in their clinic. But for a patient or their family, it might mean translating those same results, but relevant to their daily life. So it's providing that context that is so important for patients and their families. So diving a bit more into this scientific narrative or how we develop it, it's really about building alignment from the start. We have to be on point with language, with tone, the depth of information for audience, without losing that fidelity to the science and keeping that credible. So essentially, what our aim is to do is ensure that everyone within that organization is singing from the same songbook, so to speak, right? And that we're not confusing the market. I think we maybe have seen examples of this with different messaging. And why I'm particularly excited to talk about this today is I've just returned with a team, and we were on site with a client in a strategy meeting doing this exact thing. So we had representation from a cross-functional group to start building this scientific narrative and exploring where we could go, which also includes consulting external audiences, so HCPs and patients. But we had patient communications, internal communications, medical, clinical, government affairs. It really was cross-functional setting to start exploring what messages we needed to hone in on. What we actually best understood coming out of our meeting is that while we have disparate and different stakeholders in some cases, they are often struggling with the same issue. So we can create one narrative to help start solving that communication challenge. So it isn't just about really simplifying the language in the end, it's about creating respect for all those different audiences and recognizing that different stakeholders bring different expertise and in particular that lived experience to the table. And it's these patient stakeholders, their families and caregivers who deserve a seat at the table. And medical affairs can now meet them there without diluting the message. So it's really a continuation of something that Reverba has always done well in bringing clarity, empathy, and relevance to complex conversations.
So where does this go in the long term? Should medical affairs be going further in engaging directly with patients, rather than always filtering engagement through HCPs? Where's that line today, and where do you all believe that it should be?
Right. Yeah, of course. And yeah, thanks so much. It's a really good question, one that we talk a lot about within our organization. But traditionally, as we all know, medical affairs has been very focused on HCP engagement. And it's the idea that information flows from that clinician as the trusted conduit to patients. And so while that still holds true, it doesn't necessarily reflect the full reality of maybe how patients engage with science and care today. So as mentioned off the top, patients are more informed than ever, more curious and more involved in their care than ever before. And they're seeking out the data. They're asking the questions in an effort to understand the science. And in many cases, helping really shape the treatment landscape. So yes, I believe medical affairs should be going further and engaging directly with patients, families, caregivers, especially when it comes to that scientific clarity, the education, and in particular, putting that into practice with co creation. So it doesn't mean we're suggesting it's not bypassing a doctor visit, it's about complementing it, right? And really ensuring that patients are just the passive recipients of information, which I think is really tends to be the norm at the moment, but that they're active participants in understanding their treatment and the disease management options that they have available to them. So, in order to get there, it really means about building the infrastructure to do that responsibly and with the right guardrails, compliance oversight, and most importantly, respect. So, medical affairs means that they get to go beyond this passive or maybe like transactional educational setting, but the true opportunity really lies in helping patients and HCPs make that treatment decision together. So, it's not about maybe where the line is about medical affairs can engage with patients. It's about how do we do it with, I think, purpose and integrity.
Carolyn, we've talked about this a lot. And how can medical affairs help providers turn those short appointments into something more meaningful, more of a scientific or science based conversation?
For sure. And it's something that we're really starting to put into practice, right? So when we think about this is like what you've laid out here, Cheryl, is one of the most like real world challenges we continue to see across the board. HCPs are expected to process all of this evolving clinical data. Probably we've never had so much to consume before at the rate it's being published. They have to also explain complex treatment options and respond to patients who often come with that Google search, a Reddit thread, a TikTok video, all in under 15 minutes, right? No big deal. But I think medical affairs has this real opportunity to take on the responsibility and maybe step in with new tools that are not just scientifically sound, but built for that actual clinic environment where they're engaging, with the patient in the exam room. So that doesn't just mean the content that it's got to be visual, brief, adaptable for these different uses, and also grounded in maybe what matters most to both that clinician and the patient themselves. So what we aim to do is it's really about anticipating the questions that could be asked. And the best way that we can do that is asking the patients themselves in a consultancy or forum type setting. And we have to understand what misconceptions are out there about the information, what trade-offs will patients want to understand about a treatment choice, what's trending online that could skew some perceptions. And so if we can help HCPs proactively address those, often friction points, um, and truly understand the patient journey, we can turn those 15-minute conversations in the exam room into moments of clarity and not confusion. Yeah, exactly. Right. And lastly, it's not just about providing the resource, right? It's about co creating with the users of those tools and working with HCPs and patients in an equal setting to design education and those shared decision making tools that are relevant, respectful, and actually usable. So that's really where medical affairs can continue to move from being that scientific knowledge source to a strategic partner in the exam room. So if I could just one more thing, Cheryl, it just came to me that we have like a really great example of this of co-creating a shared decision-making tool. And just to paint that picture really briefly is imagine putting 5 patients and 5 physicians in a room where they have a shared goal to understand what each contribution is when it comes to a conversation. And we actually ran a one-day workshop in just as I described with 10 advisors representing patients and HCPs to build that new tool. And the learnings from it were incredibly valuable to make sure it was going to be as relevant and respectful to both audiences. That we helped, prove wrong was that if maybe physicians struggle to understand the difference between RCT and RWE, there would be no way that patients would. But we proved that wrong by simply providing it in the right tone, language, visual representation to help it make sense for them.
That's amazing. It's really about kind of respecting the patient enough to trust that they can understand these things, right?
Exactly.
So what you're talking about is sort of expanding the scope of communications to encompass medical affairs, patient engagement, HCP education, digital platforms, real world evidence. But in so many organizations, all these functions are housed separately and operating in silos. So how should they move forward?
Yeah, definitely. You're right, Jonah. So that these different functions of medical affairs, the brand messaging, the patient communications all run in different silos. You have medical affairs speaking in one language, marketing speaking in another, and patients caught somewhere in the middle. We talk a lot in the industry, right, about patient centricity, but it also means designing those same systems around their experience and not designing around org charts or a tagline on a wall, right? But this is where medical affairs actually serves as that strategic bridge between R&D activities and commercialization, and they have this growing role in their organization to do just that. But I guess to answer the question, right? So, what's really getting in the way? We have legacy structures. We often have fragmented data or owners of that data and information. And then we have a tendency to treat channels. Cheryl, you talked about omnichannel up above, but we treat these channels maybe as separate tactics instead of part of like a unified journey to create for that audience or stakeholder. And to make these changes happen, we need that infrastructure and we need it to change. That means better content alignment across functions, better tech to track and personalize engagement, and better internal collaboration, especially between medical affairs, commercial, and patient strategy teams. I think that's really where the magic can start to happen. And it's the companies that will succeed are the ones that break down these barriers. They build trust through compliance and authenticity and create experiences where patients and providers feel they're part of that same single conversation. So, Cheryl, you posted, and I was really excited to see this. You posted a really interesting paper on LinkedIn recently, on this very topic. Do you want to share a bit more?
There's a great example out of Spain. AstraZeneca introduced something called the Evidence Blueprint Initiative, and they published it in Pharmaceutical Medicine. And it's a structured program that strengthens the role of medical affairs by enabling sort of this collaboration across commercial, clinical, and patient engagement functions. And when you think about it and step back, this is empowering medical affairs in a new way. And when you give them that seat at the table, you see something really powerful happen. The science starts to reach people in ways that sort of build understanding and also confidence.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about. I mean, it really is a shakeup of the way that I think so many of us are accustomed to doing things in these industries. So we're coming to the end of our time. We've covered a lot of ground here, from scientific engagement to patient communications to medical affairs. But the thread that sort of connects all this together is the idea that patients and HCPs need access to trusted, timely, actionable information. So just to sort of recap it for us, how is Reverba Global, well set up to help the biopharma industry provide this information in this omnichannel environment?
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. So, I think what's really exciting about where Reverba Global is now is that we're able to bring both sides of the equation together. We've got patient engagement and medical affairs with equal depth and credibility. Now, I don't think many companies can truly say that. We can support global HCP education and scientific strategy while continuing to do what we've always done best, which is listen to patients, collaborate with them, and build tools that reflect their lived experience. We prepare the market, we onboard the stakeholders, translate the science, and activate multiple channels and deliver measurable impact. That's what I would say, Cheryl.
Thank you, Carolyn. And I just want to also add, what sets us apart is that we're not juggling two separate playbooks. We're actually building one integrated experience that connects patients and providers and the pharmaceutical companies across every touch point. We've developed proven processes and methodologies and also technology tools to make those connections real. Our engine is called Reverba Bridge. It's the ecosystem that helps support everything that we do. And, it's helped us support hundreds of phase 2, 3 trials, almost 50 post-marketing studies. It's helped us train, tens of thousands of investigators and staff. And it's also helped support our engagement with over 1 million patients. And, we've done all this with an eye for compliance. We're SOC 2 Type 2 certified as well as ISO 27001 certified. And that matters on a global scale when we're talking about dealing with PHI and PII, data privacy and security. But I just want to also say this isn't about content volume. It's about really creating connected, science-driven experiences that build trust with all these different stakeholders and relationships. So whether it's with a patient or a care partner or a healthcare provider, you are connecting this entire ecosystem to make a difference.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, really interesting stuff. And I wish we could keep talking about it, because I think you mentioned a lot of things that are really important. Um, but we do have to bring this particular podcast to a close. Thank you both so much for joining me.
Thank you, Jonah, so much. It's great seeing you.
That concludes another episode of the pharmaphorum podcast. You can find more information about this episode, including a download link and information about previous installments, at pharmaphorum.com/podcast. The pharmaphorum podcast is also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, Pocket Casts, Podbean, and pretty much wherever else you download your podcasts. Just search for pharmaphorum and follow and hit subscribe. Of course, don't forget to visit the website itself, where you can sign up for daily and weekly news and analysis bulletins, and follow us on Blue Sky and LinkedIn at pharmaphorum. That's Pharmaphorum. That's all for now. Thanks for listening.